He was the sheriff everyone trusted, a decorated veteran, a father, a husband. For over 30 years, he ran Pike County with an iron will and a spotless reputation. But behind closed doors, he was hiding a secret that would destroy everything. When a young inmate caught his eye, what began as a forbidden affair spiraled into obsession, jealousy, and murder. This is the story of Sheriff Royce Delaney, and how a love he couldn't admit became a crime he couldn't escape. They said Sheriff Royce Delaney was a man who had nothing to hide. For over 3 decades, he had worn his badge like a second skin, upright, unflinching, and utterly predictable. Folks in Pike County trusted him like they trusted their morning coffee. Strong, dependable, and always the same. He lived on Oak Ridge Lane in a modest white farmhouse with navy shutters and a porch swing that squeaked in a breeze. His wife, Lorraine, taught Sunday school at the Baptist church. They'd been married 31 years. 2 grown kids, one in the military, the other a nurse down in Jackson. From the outside, it was the picture of Southern decency. But behind the crisp uniform and measured voice, behind the handshakes at church and his firm but fair courtroom demeanor, Royce held something tighter than his service pistol, a truth he had buried for most of his life. He had known it since he was 12, knew it when he caught himself staring too long at his cousin's friend at summer camp, knew it when he said "I do" to Lorraine and felt something inside him quietly fracture. But this was Mississippi. This was 1968, and boys like him weren't allowed to be anything else. So he became everything they told him to be. And over time, Royce Delaney got good, very good, at pretending. In his official capacity, Sheriff Delaney oversaw the Pike County Regional Correctional Facility, a medium-security prison tucked behind pine-covered hills on the county's west side. It wasn't a place most people thought about, unless they had a relative doing time there. To Royce, it was routine, predictable, controlled, until the spring of 2021, when a young inmate named Deontay Reed arrived. At first, Royce barely noticed him. Just another arrest on the docket. Petty theft, resisting arrest, no priors. Barely 23, cocky as hell, and built like someone who'd learned to fight for every inch of space he ever had. But there was something about the way Deontay carried himself. He didn't flinch like the others. Didn't look away when Royce passed. Didn't shrink when spoken to. He looked directly into the sheriff's eyes, like he saw something no one else had ever dared to see. Royce felt it. A twinge. A flicker. A warmth he hadn't let himself feel in decades. And that scared him more than anything. Inside the silence of his truck after work, Royce would sit parked under the same streetlight, hands gripping the wheel long after the engine had cooled. At home, Lorraine would ask if everything was okay. He'd nod, kiss her forehead, and retreat to the garage with a 6-pack in silence. But something had shifted. The air in the prison corridors felt different now. He found himself walking past Deontay's cell more often than necessary, asking questions he had no reason to ask, offering favors, small privileges. It was the beginning of something he couldn't stop. But of course, no one knew that yet. To the outside world, Sheriff Royce Delaney still had no secrets. The first time Royce Delaney actually noticed Deontay Reed was in courtroom C, just after lunch on a humid April Wednesday. He had sat through half a dozen arraignments already, meth heads, deadbeat dads, drunks, swinging fists in Waffle House parking lots. The usual. He wasn't paying much attention. His mind was on the squeaky fan above the judge's bench and the smell of cheap coffee on his breath. Then the bailiff called the next case. Deontay Xavier Reed. Theft, resisting arrest, possession of burglary tools. Royce didn't even look up until he heard a voice that didn't match the rest of them. Confident, sharp, young, but already carrying 1,000 miles in it. Not guilty, Your Honor. Royce glanced toward the defendant's box and saw him. Deontay stood there in wrinkled county blues, shackled at the ankles, but completely unbothered. He was tall, athletic, with a slight scar above his left brow. His posture wasn't angry or arrogant. It was controlled, like he knew something no one else in the room did. For half a second, their eyes locked. Royce felt his chest tighten. It wasn't fear. It wasn't lust. It was recognition. Like Deontay had reached into the part of him he thought was long dead and smiled. Deontay was remanded without bond, assigned to cell block C at Pike County Correctional. He wasn't the worst inmate, not by a mile. No gang ties, no history of violence. But there was something about him that made the guards uneasy. A knowing grin, a way of looking through people instead of at them. Royce tried to ignore it, told himself he was imagining things, told himself it was just another kid playing tough. But he started showing up at the prison more than usual. Little surprise inspections, just checking in. He'd stroll past the cell blocks, lingering a second too long outside C-12, Deontay's bunk. One afternoon, Deontay was sweeping the hallway with a push broom when Royce passed by. Without breaking stride, Deontay said quietly, "You keep walking past me like you're lost. You looking for something, Sheriff?" Royce stopped, just for a breath. "You'd better watch your tone, son," he said flatly. Deontay gave a half smile. "I'm not your son." Then he turned and kept sweeping. That night, Royce didn't go home right away. He sat in the back parking lot of the prison, windows rolled down, listening to the cicadas and the hum of the perimeter lights. He thought of his wife's voice, the porch swing, the life he'd spent 30 years building. And yet, all he could see was that half smile. All he could feel was something unspoken, rising. He hated it. He wanted more. Over the next few weeks, Royce began assigning Deontay to work duty in the admin wing, emptying trash, wiping down walls. Always during Royce's shifts. Always under the guise of inmate responsibility programs. No one questioned him. He was the sheriff. And slowly, what began as stolen glances and veiled words turned into conversations. Then confessions. Then secrets whispered behind locked doors. But Royce still told himself this wasn't anything. That it would pass. That he was in control. He had no idea he was standing at the edge of something that would destroy them both. By early May, the routine had settled into something unspoken. Every Thursday afternoon, Deontay would be randomly assigned to clean the administrative wing. More specifically, Royce's private office tucked at the end of a long hallway no inmates were ever supposed to access alone. But no one said a word. No one dared. Royce had been sheriff for 33 years. If he said something was procedure, it was... The first time Deontay was brought in, Royce barely looked up from his desk. "You know how to mop?" he asked casually. Deontay raised a brow. "I ain't dumb, Sheriff. I've seen a bucket before." Royce didn't respond, just gestured toward the closet. "Supplies are in there. Don't take all day." It was a lie. There was nothing to clean. No dust, no grime. Royce's office was cleaner than a hospital wing, but it gave them time, alone, behind a locked door. At first, they talked about nothing, about everything. Deontay told stories from the street, how his mom kicked him out at 15, how he slept on church pews some nights and sold weed the next. Royce listened in silence. Occasionally, he'd offer something back, a story from his army days. A drunken fight he once broke up at the county fair. They were two men from different worlds, and yet something bound them. Something fragile and dangerous. One afternoon, Royce handed Deontay a Coke from the mini fridge behind his desk. Deontay took it, sat on the edge of the chair, and studied him. "Why me?" he asked bluntly. "You got all this. The badge, the wife, the town in your pocket. Why risk it?" Royce didn't answer right away. Then, staring out the narrow window behind him, he said quietly, "Because when I look at you, I don't feel like I'm dying inside." What happened next wasn't violent. It wasn't frantic. It was quiet, almost sad. A hand brushed against another. A shoulder grazed a chest. A kiss that wasn't supposed to happen. Then another. Then all pretense vanished like smoke in the Georgia heat. In that office, Royce stopped being Sheriff Delaney, and Deontay stopped being inmate number 47288. They were just two broken men, grasping at something warm in a world made of cold rules. But nothing stays secret forever. Within weeks, Deontay started walking different. Lighter, bolder. A few guards noticed. One even joked, Reed must have found religion or a sugar daddy. Royce felt the shift too, and it terrified him. Because what was once theirs alone began to feel unbalanced. Deontay was no longer just a secret. He became a threat, one that Royce couldn't control. Worse yet, there was Miguel Santos, the young correctional officer who had just transferred in from Mobile. Good-looking, easygoing, and apparently interested in Deontay too. Royce caught them laughing together once in the mess hall. Just a passing comment, a shared smirk. But in Royce's mind, it was betrayal. Later that night, in his truck, Royce gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. He could feel something dark rising in his chest, something he hadn't felt since he was a soldier in the desert. Rage mixed with fear. Because if Deontay could smile like that at someone else, if he could replace Royce that easily, then maybe this hadn't meant anything to him at all. And that idea, that he was just a temporary escape for someone who had nothing to lose, was more than Royce could handle. He had risked everything, and he wasn't about to let Deontay walk away. The hardest thing about jealousy isn't the fire. It's the silence afterward, when the flames die down and leave behind something colder, something heavier. Sheriff Royce Delaney had spent a lifetime keeping control of his men, of his marriage, of himself. But jealousy doesn't respect discipline. Every time Royce saw Deontay talking to Officer Miguel Santos, it chipped away at the fragile delusion he'd built. A nod, a chuckle, the way Deontay leaned in just a little too close. It was nothing, Royce knew that. But in his head, it became everything. He tried confronting Deontay once, pulled him into the admin wing under the pretense of a work infraction. As soon as the door shut, Royce hissed, "What's going on between you and that new guard?" Deontay blinked, unfazed. "Miguel." Royce clenched his jaw. "Don't play dumb with me." Deontay stared at him for a long second, then leaned back against the file cabinet with a crooked smile. "You jealous, Sheriff?" Royce stepped closer, his voice low and shaking. "You're not some toy. You don't get to play games with me." Deontay's smile faded. "No, Sheriff. I'm not your toy, and you don't get to own me." He paused, then added, calm and deliberate, "Whatever this is, it ends when I say so." That night, Royce didn't go home. He drove for hours down back roads he hadn't seen in years. The heat pressed in through the cracked window. Country radio murmured low in the background. He kept seeing Deontay's face in the rearview mirror. Kept hearing that voice. "It ends when I say so." It was a trigger, not just to his jealousy, but to his deepest fear, that he had never really been in control at all. The next morning, he filed a request to temporarily disable a section of the surveillance system for electrical maintenance. No one questioned it. The cameras in Cell Block C would go dark for exactly 47 minutes during the 2 a.m. shift change the following Friday. That same day, Royce personally reassigned Officer Santos to the South Tower. Then he visited the armory, not for a gun, but for something more personal. His old K-Bar combat knife, a relic from his time in Desert Storm. Black handle, 7-inch steel blade, balanced and deadly. It had stayed in his closet for over 20 years. Now it sat under his uniform, pressed flat against his ribcage. Waiting. Friday night came humid and thick, like the air itself was warning him not to go through with it. But Royce moved through the prison like a man on a mission. A nod here, a signed logbook there. All routine, all unremarkable. By 1:58 a.m., he stood alone in the hallway outside cell C-12. His hand hovered over the key. Inside, Deontay was asleep, or at least pretending to be. Royce took a deep breath and turned the lock. 1:59 a.m. The electronic lock clicked open with a soft snap, like a breath being held too long, finally released. Sheriff Royce Delaney stepped into the dim cell. The air was thick with sweat, bleach, and the faint musk of sleeping men. But in C-12, there was only one bed. One figure. Deontay lay on his back, eyes closed, one arm over his chest, breathing steady. Royce stood still in the doorway. His heart beat in his ears like distant thunder. For a second, he considered leaving, shutting the door, pretending this moment never existed. But then Deontay spoke, softly, without opening his eyes. "Took you long enough." Royce froze. "I figured it'd be tonight," Deontay added, voice calm. "The way you've been looking lately, like something broke loose inside you." Royce stepped forward, slowly. His boots didn't make a sound. "Don't do this," he said, barely above a whisper. "Don't act like you knew everything." Deontay finally opened his eyes. "I didn't have to know everything," he said. "I just had to know you." He sat up, swung his legs over the side of the bed, elbows resting on his knees. "So what now? You here to scare me? Beat me? What? Prove you still got power over me." Royce's hand moved slowly to his side, resting over the outline of the knife beneath his shirt. "You humiliated me," he said, his voice trembling. "You made me feel like I was nothing, like I meant nothing to you." Deontay shook his head. "Nah, Sheriff. You did that to yourself." Silence. Heavy. Charged. Royce stepped closer until he was standing right in front of him. The dim light flickered above them. "Why'd you do it?" Royce asked. "Why flirt with Santos? Why smile at him like that?" Deontay looked up, eyes hard. "Because I could. Because I wanted you to see what it feels like to be on the outside for once." That did it. The knife came out so fast, it didn't even catch the light. One movement, one thrust, straight into Deontay's chest. His body jerked, but he didn't scream. Just a strangled breath. Eyes wide, blood blooming instantly across the front of his prison shirt. Royce stood there, shaking, staring at what he'd done. The knife still in his hand. His knees locked, his throat dry. "You didn't have to do this," Deontay whispered, blood trickling from his lips. He reached up weakly, fingers brushing Royce's arm. Not in anger, but in something closer to forgiveness. "I was never trying to break you." And then nothing. His hand fell away. His head slumped. Still. Gone. Royce stood there for almost a full minute, waiting for the weight of it to hit him. But nothing did. Not yet. Just a strange, echoing quiet. Then he moved. Efficient. Robotic. He wiped the knife. Took Deontay's own toothbrush and snapped it. Laid it beside the body. Used Deontay's hand to grip the blade, smudging his own prints. Then he opened the bottom drawer of the metal desk and pulled out the note he'd written earlier, shaky handwriting, folded twice. "I can't live like this anymore." He placed it beside Deontay's bunk. Then he walked out, closed the door, and by the time the cameras came back online at 2:46 a.m., Cell C-12 looked like just another tragedy. Another inmate who gave up. Another ghost in the system. But one man wasn't buying it. The morning shift started like any other. Coffee pots bubbled in the break room. Guards shuffled in with half-open eyes. The radios crackled with routine chatter. But when the call came in, inmate deceased in cell C-12, the air in Pike County Correctional snapped cold. Deontay Reed, 23 years old, found slumped over in his bunk with a homemade blade in his hand and a suicide note nearby. The official report was filed within hours. Probable suicide. No signs of struggle. Case closed. Most of the staff moved on by lunch. But not Officer Miguel Santos. Miguel hadn't been there long, just 4 months on the job. He was young, clean-cut, and polite to a fault. Most of the older officers shrugged him off as soft. But Miguel had something they didn't. An instinct that didn't go quiet. And something about the scene didn't sit right. For one, Deontay didn't seem suicidal. Not to him. Just the day before, Deontay had joked about getting out early on good behavior, then laughed when Miguel said he was too smart for this place. There was no edge in him. No shadow. And then there was the note, written in shaky, unnatural penmanship, like someone trying to imitate what sadness was supposed to look like. Miguel had worked gang units in Mobile. He'd seen real suicide scenes. This wasn't one. This felt staged. That evening, while reviewing security logs, Miguel noticed a curious gap. From 1:59 a.m. to 2:46 a.m., the hallway cameras outside cell block C were offline. Routine maintenance, the system said. Signed off by Sheriff Delaney himself. Miguel stared at the screen. Routine, he muttered. He checked the rotation log. He hadn't been on duty that night, but Delaney had been present. Unusual for a sheriff to be on site at 2 a.m., let alone alone. His gut twisted. He started asking quiet questions. Nothing direct, just guardroom chatter. Was Deontay acting weird this week? Anyone know why Delaney pulled camera duty Friday? Most people shrugged. Some warned him not to stir the pot. But one senior officer, Brenner, close to retirement, pulled Miguel aside later that night. You want to make it long in this place? Brenner said quietly, learn what's yours to fix and what's already been buried. You saying I should shut up? I'm saying Delaney's been sheriff here longer than you've been alive. And there's stuff you don't want to know. Miguel walked away with a chill on his back. But he didn't stop digging. 2 nights later, he pulled the laundry bag from cell C-12 before it went to incineration. Tucked inside Deontay's sheets, he found something strange. A smudge of dark ink on the inside hem of the blanket. Barely visible, but under flashlight, it was clear. A partial imprint of a number, 0761, in faded black. Miguel froze. He'd seen those numbers before. The ink stamp used on all department-issued sheriff uniforms. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't tell anyone. But he made a decision. It was time to take this higher. FBI Special Agent Celeste Monroe wasn't the type people expected when they heard federal investigator. She was 32, African-American, with tightly curled hair pulled into a neat bun and a face that always looked 2 seconds away from calling her bluff. She wore gray suits, sensible flats, and carried herself like someone who'd learned early that being underestimated was a weapon, not a weakness. So when she walked into Pike County Correctional one warm Tuesday morning, badge clipped, heels silent on concrete, most of the staff didn't take her seriously. That was their first mistake. Celeste had been called in on a quiet internal affairs tip from Officer Miguel Santos. It wasn't official, yet, but the combination of a dead inmate, a suspicious timeline, and a potentially compromised sheriff was enough to raise eyebrows at the bureau. Miguel met her in the parking lot, nervous but resolute. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You're either brave," she replied, "or really tired of breathing the same crooked air." He gave a half smile, a little of both. Inside, Celeste requested access to all footage from the week surrounding Deontay Reed's death. She was told the system had malfunctioned. She asked for maintenance logs. They were incomplete. She asked who had ordered the camera outage. Sheriff Delaney, a tech, reluctantly replied. He signed off on it personally. She didn't flinch, just nodded. "I'd like to speak with him." Royce Delaney met her in his office, still carrying the gravitas of a man used to being in charge. "You from Washington?" he asked, standing but not offering a handshake. "Mobile field office," she replied smoothly. Just here to ask a few questions about inmate Deontay Reed. He sat down. Slow, calm, calculated. Tragic situation. Kid had demons like most of them. Celeste studied him. Funny thing, she said. Most suicides don't happen on nights with no surveillance. Most suicide notes don't have fingerprints that don't match. Royce's eyes narrowed slightly. Just a flicker. But she caught it. Sounds like you're suggesting something, Agent. I'm just gathering facts, she said. The kind that don't lie. That night, Celeste reviewed Miguel's evidence again. The ink stamp on the blanket hem. The timeline of Royce's presence. The falsified log entries. And the note, written in someone else's hand. What she didn't have was proof of motive. Until Miguel gave her one last piece. Deontay kept a journal. He said, "It's not official. Just some pages I found under his mattress." He called Delaney the colonel. Celeste flipped through the tattered notebook, her fingers tightening as she read. "He says he loves me, but only in shadows. I think he'd kill me if he thought I belonged to someone else." There it was. Intent, obsession, fear. And now, Celeste Monroe had enough to move. But bringing down a man like Royce Delaney wouldn't happen in a courtroom alone. It had to happen in the light, where secrets couldn't survive. It happened on a Thursday. The sun was high over Pike County Courthouse, casting clean shadows across the lawn where folding chairs had been set up for Sheriff Delaney's 33rd anniversary ceremony. A brass band played softly near the steps. City councilmen shook hands. Local news crews hovered, bored, waiting for sound bites. Roy stood at the podium in full dress uniform, medals polished, voice steady as he thanked the community for their trust. His wife, Lorraine, sat in the front row, hands folded in her lap, her smile rehearsed and polite. That's when the black SUV pulled up behind the crowd, and Special Agent Celeste Monroe stepped out with 2 marshals and a warrant in hand. The moment was surreal. She waited for Royce to finish his sentence. Then, clear and cold, she said into the mic, "Sheriff Royce Delaney, you're under arrest for the murder of inmate Deontay Reed. Step away from the podium." Gasps swept the crowd. Lorraine stood up, face pale. Royce blinked once. Then again. He didn't speak. The marshals moved in. Handcuffs clicked over his wrists. The silence that followed was deeper than any applause he'd ever received. At trial, the truth unraveled like an old rope. Celeste laid it out piece by piece. The camera outage, authorized solely by Royce. The ink transfer from his own uniform to Deontay's blanket. The forged suicide note, proven to be written in Royce's hand. And most damning of all, Deontay's hidden journal, which described the sheriff's advances, threats, and possessive obsession. Lorraine never came to court. She filed for divorce 2 weeks later. Royce never testified. He simply sat there, stone still, eyes forward, as if watching a house he built slowly catch fire. The jury took less than 4 hours. Guilty. First-degree murder. Abuse of power. Tampering with evidence. Life in prison. No parole. He would now serve time in the very system he once controlled. The cell Royce Delaney now occupied at Angola State Penitentiary was barely 6 feet wide. It had no windows, no desk, just a cot, a metal sink, and a toilet that gurgled at night like it was haunted. He didn't fight the sentence, didn't appeal, didn't speak. He hadn't spoken since the trial. Even now, 2 months into his life sentence, guards said he hadn't uttered a single word. But he heard things, footsteps outside his cell at night, that slowed just before moving on. The hum of the fluorescent light overhead, buzzing like an insect trapped in glass. And sometimes, when it was quietest, he heard Deontay's voice. The first time it happened, Royce was lying flat on his back, staring at the ceiling. It was 3:14 a.m. He'd been drifting somewhere between sleep and something darker when he heard it. Low, calm, familiar. You thought you could bury it. Royce bolted upright, heart racing. No one was there, just the walls, the darkness, the weight of what he had done pressing down on his ribs like wet cement. He didn't sleep for the next 3 nights. Instead, he paced his cell in silence. He thought about his wife, Lorraine, whether she cried when she signed the divorce papers, whether she had known, really known, what was inside him all these years. He thought about his kids, if they'd changed their last names yet. He thought about his badge, how heavy it had always felt, how it had once made him feel righteous. Now it felt like a lie made of brass. But most of all, he thought about Deontay. Not the last version, the one slumped over in a pool of blood, whispering forgiveness as life slipped from his lips. No, he thought about the version that had leaned on his desk with a half-smile and asked, "Why me?" He didn't have an answer. Not then. Not now. One day, a prison chaplain stopped outside his cell. A thin man with gray eyes and soft shoes. "Do you believe in redemption, Mr. Delaney?" Royce didn't move. God doesn't stop knocking just because you won't open the door. Still silence. The chaplain slipped a Bible through the bars. Royce didn't pick it up, but that night he opened it anyway. Not to the Gospels, not to Psalms, but to Ecclesiastes. All is vanity and a chasing after wind. He read it once, then again, and closed the book without marking the page. Some nights, he dreamed in full color. He and Deontay were in his office again, but the desk was gone. The walls were gone. They stood in the middle of a field Royce had never seen before. Sunflowers tall around them, a sky like velvet. Deontay laughed. A real laugh. Not sarcastic. Not guarded. "You could have just walked away, Sheriff," he said, reaching up to touch Royce's chest. "You could have let it be what it was." And then Royce looked down and saw the knife in his own hand, blood dripping on his sunflowers. He always woke up before Deontay fell. One afternoon, a guard knocked on the bars. "You got mail." Royce didn't answer. The guard slid the envelope under the cell door anyway. It was from Miguel Santos. A single page. Typed. "I won't pretend to understand why you did what you did. I just know that Deontay didn't deserve it. You could have let him live. You could have let yourself live, too. Instead, you killed the only honest thing you ever had. No threats. No anger. Just truth." Royce folded the letter slowly, tucked it inside the Bible, between pages he would never read. Time moved differently behind bars. Some days felt like hours, others like decades. But one thing never changed. Every night, as Royce lay on his cot, hands folded across his chest, he would whisper Deontay's name into the dark. Just once, like a prayer he didn't believe in, like an apology too late to matter. Deontay. The silence that followed was always the same. In the weeks that followed, Officer Miguel Santos quietly resigned. He moved to Birmingham, took a job teaching criminal justice at a community college. He kept Deontay's journal, not out of morbid curiosity, but as a reminder, because power without conscience, he later told the class, kills more than just people. It kills truth. And Agent Celeste Monroe, she went back to Mobile, on to the next case, the next secret. But every once in a while, she'd remember the boy with the scar above his brow, who smiled at the wrong man and paid the price. In a gray cell at Angola State Penitentiary, Sheriff Royce Delaney spends his days sweeping floors and avoiding eye contact. He never speaks about Deontay, not to the guards, not to his lawyer, not even to God. But at night, when no one is watching, he dreams of a locked door, a quiet office, and a boy who looked at him like he saw through everything, and then turned away,